Welcome to chapter 6 of Lord of the Flies. In this chapter you're going to see a little more excitement, a little more action. And if you recall from the end of chapter 5, Ralph and Piggy and Simon stood around on the beach at the end of the assembly talking about the majesty of grown-up life and how they wished that the grown-ups would send them a sign. So in this chapter you're going to see kind of a sign from the grown-up world, and it's pretty exciting. This chapter is called Beast from Air. There was no light left save that of the stars. When they had understood what made this ghostly noise and Percival was quiet again, Ralph and Simon picked him up unhandily and carried him to a shelter. Piggy hung about near for all his brave words, and the three bigger boys went together to the next shelter. They lay restlessly and noisily among the dry leaves, watching the patch of stars that was the opening toward the lagoon. Sometimes a little one cried out from the other shelters, and once a big one spoke in the dark. Then they too fell asleep. A sliver of moon rose over the horizon, hardly large enough to make a path of light even when it sat right down on the water. But there were other lights in the sky that moved fast, winked, or went out, though not even a faint popping came down from the battle fought at 10 miles height. So this is kind of a sign of the adult world, and it's not necessarily a good sign, as we have the boys kind of fighting amongst themselves on the island. Adults are fighting amongst themselves in the sky, with their jets. But a sign came down from the world of grown-ups, though at the time there was no child awake to read it. There was a sudden bright explosion and a corkscrew trail across the sky, then darkness again and stars. There was a speck above the island, a figure dropping swiftly beneath a parachute, a figure that hung with dangling limbs. The changing winds of various altitudes took the figure where they would. Then, 3 miles up, the wind steadied and bore it in a descending curve round the sky and swept it in a great slant across the reef and the lagoon toward the mountain. The figure fell and crumpled among the blue flowers of the mountainside. But now there was a gentle breeze at this height too, and the parachute flopped and banged and pulled. So the figure, with feet that dragged behind it, slid up the mountain. Yard by yard, puff by puff, the breeze hauled the figure through the blue flowers, over the boulders and red stones, till it lay huddled among the shattered rocks of the mountain top. So you're getting the idea that the person that is attached to this parachute is not alive. The limbs are dangling, the feet are dragging, so this is a dead person. Here the breeze was fitful and allowed the strings of the parachute to tangle and festoon, and the figure sat up, its helmeted head between its knees, held by a complication of lines. When the breeze blew, the lines would strain taut, and some accident of this pull lifted the head and chest upright, so that the figure seemed to peer across the brow of the mountain. Then, each time the wind dropped, the lines would slacken, and the figure bow forward again, sinking its head between its knees. So as the stars moved across the sky, the figure sat on the mountain top and bowed and sank and bowed again. So the way that this dead person has landed on the island with his parachute is causing him to lean forward and to sit up again whenever the wind blows this parachute. So you can kind of imagine it's going to create this really creepy figure that's leaning down and then sitting up again. And this is what we call dramatic irony. And dramatic irony is just when the reader knows more about a situation than the characters do. So keep that in mind. In the darkness of early morning, there were noises by a rock a little way down the side of the mountain. 2 boys rolled out a pile of brushwood and dead leaves, 2 dim shadows talking sleepily to each other. They were the twins on duty at the fire. In theory, one should have been asleep and one on watch, but they could never manage to do things sensibly if that meant acting independently, and since staying awake all night was impossible, they had both gone to sleep. Now they approached the darker smudge that had been the signal fire, yawning, rubbing their eyes, treading with practiced feet. When they reached it, they stopped yawning, and one ran quickly back for brushwood and leaves. The other knelt down. "I believe it's out," He fiddled with the sticks that were pushed into his hands. No. He lay down and put his lips close to the smudge and blew softly. His face appeared, lit redly. He stopped blowing for a moment. Sam, give us tinderwood. Eric bent down and blew softly again till the patch was bright. Sam poked a piece of tinderwood into the hot spot and then a branch. The glow increased and the branch took fire. Sam piled on more branches. Don't burn the lot, said Eric. You're putting on too much. Let's warm up. We'll only have to fetch more wood. I'm cold. So am I. Besides, it's dark. All right, then. Eric squatted back and watched Sam make up the fire. He built a little tent of dead wood, and the fire was safely alight. That was near. He'd have been waxy. Huh. For a few moments, the twins watched the fire in silence. Then Eric sniggered. Wasn't he waxy? About the fire and the pig. Lucky he went for Jack instead of us. Huh. Remember old Waxy at school? Boy, you are driving me slowly insane. So it's like they're joking about some old teacher or something that they had at school, reliving the old days, so to speak. The twins shared their identical laughter, then remembered the darkness and other things, and glanced round uneasily. The flames, busy about the tent, drew their eyes back again. Eric watched the scurrying wood lice that were so frantically unable to avoid the flames, and thought of the first fire just down there on the steeper side of the mountain, where now was complete darkness. He did not like to remember it, and looked away at the mountain top. Warmth radiated now and beat pleasantly on them. Sam amused himself by fitting branches into the fire as closely as possible. Eric spread out his hands, searching for the distance at which the heat was just bearable. Idly looking beyond the fire, he resettled the scattered rocks from their flat shadows into daylight contours. Just there was the big rock and the 3 stones there that split the rock. And there was a gap, and there beyond was a gap. Just there, Sam. Huh? Nothing. The flames were mastering the branches. The bark was curling and falling away, the wood exploding. The tent fell inwards and flung a wide circle of light over the mountain top. Sam. Huh. Sam. Sam. Sam looked at Eric irritably. The intensity of Eric's gaze made the direction in which he looked terrible, for Sam had his back to it. It'd be like if somebody's like, oh my God, and they're like pointing to something that was frightening them over your shoulder, so that you're like, uh-oh, it'd be scary to turn around. So Sam scrambled round the fire, squatted by Eric, and looked to see. They became motionless, gripped in each other's arms, 4 unwinking eyes aimed and 2 mouths open. Far beneath them the trees of the forest sighed and then roared. The hair on their foreheads fluttered, and flames blew out sideways from the fire. It's just describing a wind that's coming along, that's all. 15 yards away from them came the plopping noise of the fabric blown open. Neither of the boys screamed, but the grip of their arms tightened and their mouths grew peaked. For perhaps 10 seconds they crouched like that, while the flailing fire sent smoke and sparks and waves of inconstant light over the top of the mountain. Then, as though they had but one terrified mind between them, they scrambled away over the rocks and fled. So they're sitting there, and then all of a sudden this wind comes up, and the beast, or this man, rises up, and it scares these boys.